Today, we're pulling back the curtain on America's biggest steak chains. We're talking ingredient quality, sourcing, price-to-value ratio, nutritional reality, and the stuff these restaurants would love for you to never Google. I'm ranking them from worst to best. And trust me, some of these results are going to surprise you, all right? Let's get to the rankings, starting with the worst. Coming in as the #1 worst steak chain in America, Sizzler. Look, I don't enjoy piling on a legacy brand. Sizzler has been around since 1958. Your grandparents probably loved this place, but let's be real. Sizzler in 2024 is a shadow of what it once was. And when it comes to steak quality, it's hard to defend. Sizzler operates on a budget model. Their price point looks attractive on the surface, with steaks starting around $12 to $16. But here's what you're getting for that price. USDA Select Beef, which is the lowest of the 3 USDA quality grades you'd actually want to eat. Less marbling, less flavor, and a tougher chew than Choice or Prime. Many of their cuts have also been reported to use meat tenderizers, chemical compounds like papain or bromelain injected into the steak to compensate for the low-fat content. That's not seasoning. That's a workaround. The sodium levels are also alarming. Some of their entrees clock in at over 1,800 milligrams of sodium before sides. For reference, the American Heart Association recommends no more than 2,300 milligrams for an entire day. And then there's the consistency issue. With a shrinking number of locations, the brand has struggled to maintain training standards. Reports from customers and former employees describe inconsistent cooking temps, pre-cooked steaks held under heat lamps, and pre-marinated meats that mask quality issues. Sizzler might be a nostalgia trip, but as a steak destination today, it's hard to recommend. Low-grade beef, chemical tenderizers, high sodium, and inconsistent execution. Skip it. Coming in at #2 worst, Denny's steak offerings. Now, you might be saying, Denny's is a diner, not a steakhouse. And you're right, but Denny's actively markets steak items. Their T-bone steak and eggs, their steak dinner plates, and millions of Americans eat steak at Denny's every year, so it belongs on this list. Denny's uses USDA Select or lower-tier choice beef that is almost certainly previously frozen. Their steaks are pre-portioned and shipped to locations, where the cooking is often managed by staff not trained specifically as line cooks. The T-bone steak they serve is typically a thin, tenderized, pre-marinated cut that barely resembles what most steak lovers would consider a real steak experience. The one saving grace? Price. A steak and eggs at Denny's runs you $13 to $17 depending on location. If you have zero expectations and just want protein with your coffee at 2 a.m., it does the job. But as a steak, it fails on almost every quality metric. Low-grade beef, heavily processed, limited transparency on sourcing, and nutritional data showing some items exceed 2,200 milligrams of sodium. Not a steakhouse, and it shouldn't be treated like one. Coming in at #3 worst, Logan's Roadhouse. Logan's Roadhouse has been bouncing in and out of bankruptcy for years. And unfortunately, that financial instability has consequences that end up on your plate. Logan's markets itself as a roadhouse experience. Peanut shells on the floor, country music, and the promise of a hearty steak at a blue-collar price. And for a long time, they delivered on that. But post-bankruptcy restructuring led to cost-cutting measures that hit the kitchen hard. They use primarily USDA choice beef, which isn't inherently bad. It's the industry standard for most mid-tier chains. But the issue at Logan's is consistency and execution. Multiple consumer reports have flagged that steaks are frequently overcooked beyond the ordered temperature. Portions have shrunk while prices crept up, and the seasoning approach has become increasingly salt-heavy to compensate for lower quality cuts. Their prices sit in the $18 to $36 range for steaks, which isn't terrible. But when you compare what you get at that price point versus competitors like Longhorn or Texas Roadhouse, Logan's just doesn't hold up. Mid-tier beef with inconsistent execution and shrinking portion sizes. A declining quality-to-price ratio that makes it hard to justify. Now for an honorable mention in the worst category, Outback Steakhouse. Outback deserves a mention, not as the absolute worst, but as the chain most guilty of charging premium prices for middle-of-the-road quality. Outback uses USDA choice beef, which is fine, but their signature Outback Special Sirloin, one of their most ordered items, has been criticized extensively for being a tough, lean cut that's often pre-seasoned with a heavy sodium-based spice blend. Some of their entrees contain upwards of 2,000 to 2,500 milligrams of sodium. Their bone-in ribeye sounds impressive on paper, but frequently disappoints compared to what you'd get at a dedicated steakhouse for a similar price. The bloomin' onion is iconic. The steak program is not the worst, but overpriced relative to what you're actually getting. You deserve better for $45. Now let's move into the middle of the pack, and this is where things get interesting. First up, Texas Roadhouse. Texas Roadhouse might be the single most misunderstood chain on this entire list. Here's what most people assume. It's a casual, affordable chain, so the beef must be low quality, but that assumption is wrong. Texas Roadhouse hand cuts their steaks in-house every single day. Every location has a butcher on staff. They source USDA choice beef, with some cuts falling into prime territory, and they are famously committed to not using frozen steaks. They have an in-house butcher shop model that most higher-priced chains can't claim. So why are they in the middle tier and not at the top? A few reasons. First, the dining experience itself, loud, crowded, high volume, isn't ideal for actually tasting nuance in a steak. Second, their seasoning approach is heavy. The butter and salt profiles are generous to a fault, and their nutritional numbers reflect that. A ribeye dinner can hit 1,800 to 2,400 milligrams of sodium without much effort. Third, they don't offer dry-aged beef, and while their sourcing is solid, it's not in the same league as fine dining programs. But here's the value proposition. You can get a hand-cut, fresh, properly marbled ribeye at Texas Roadhouse for $22 to $28. That is genuinely remarkable, and more steak chains should be embarrassed that a casual brand is outperforming them on something this fundamental: exceptional value, surprisingly quality beef, and a legitimate dark horse. Next in the middle tier, Longhorn Steakhouse. Longhorn Steakhouse sits a tier above Texas Roadhouse in ambiance and price, and it largely backs up that positioning with quality. Longhorn is owned by Darden Restaurants, and their purchasing power gives them access to consistently graded USDA choice beef with more rigorous quality controls than many independent chains. Longhorn is particularly strong on training. Their grill masters complete a multi-week certification program, and the brand has staked its reputation on cooking steaks to the correct temperature. Something that sounds basic, but is criminally rare in chain dining. Their fire-grilled T-bone and outlaw ribeye are consistently praised by consumers and food critics alike. They dry brine their steaks before cooking, which enhances flavor without leaning entirely on salt-heavy marinades. Prices range from $20 to $45, which sits in a reasonable mid-range. The downsides: they're still not sourcing prime beef, dry aging is not part of their program, and some locations suffer from the inconsistency that plagues any chain with hundreds of locations. But overall, solid, well-executed mid-range steakhouse experience with better training and consistency than most. Worth your time. Now for the best steak chains in America. Coming in at number 3, best, Fleming's Prime Steakhouse. Fleming's is where we start crossing into genuinely premium territory. And the key word is right there in the name, prime. Fleming sources USDA prime beef for almost their entire steak menu. Only the top 2 to 3% of beef produced in America earns the prime designation, meaning superior marbling, flavor, and tenderness. Most chains never even touch prime. Fleming's is built on it. Their wet aging process runs 28 days minimum, and their kitchen staff are trained to an elevated standard you don't find in mid-tier chains. The wine program is serious. They have over 100 wines available by the glass, which is almost unheard of. And the overall dining experience is polished without being stuffy. Price? You're looking at $50 to $90 for steaks, with the full experience easily running $100 or more per person before alcohol. That's real money. But when you're getting USDA prime beef cooked by trained culinary staff in a proper dining environment, it's a different conversation than paying $45 at Outback for select sirloin. Genuine prime beef, professional execution, elevated experience, worth the price for a special occasion. Coming in at number 2 best, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Ruth's Chris is an institution, founded in New Orleans in 1965 by Ruth Fertel, a divorced mother of 2 who bought a steakhouse she'd never been to with $18,000. Ruth's Chris has become one of the most recognized fine dining steak brands in the world, and the quality still earns the reputation. Ruth's Chris is famous for 3 things: USDA prime beef, the high heat broilers, and the sizzling butter service. Every steak is cooked in a 1,800-degree broiler and served on a plate heated to 500 degrees, ensuring the butter they finish with sizzles dramatically at the table. It's theatrical, but it also works. The crust development, the retention of internal temp, the overall presentation, it's a system that produces an objectively excellent steak. Their beef is consistently USDA prime, wet-aged a minimum of 24 to 28 days, and hand-selected by their culinary team. Portion sizes are generous. Their ribeye runs 16 ounces, their tomahawk hits 40 ounces, and they're almost obsessive about consistency across their 150-plus locations. Health note: the butter service is not for the faint of heart. Ruth's Chris Steaks, with their standard butter finish, can easily push past 800 to 1,200 calories and 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium. They do accommodate modifications, but the classic preparation is unapologetically indulgent. Price runs $60 to $120 per steak. It's expensive, but when Ruth's Chris is at its best, it's genuinely world-class chain dining. USDA prime, elite consistency, theatrical service, and a legacy pedigree. One of the best steak chain experiences in America. And the number 1 best steak chain in America, Capital Grille. Capital Grille is the answer to the question, what's the best steak chain in America? And it's not particularly close. Here's why. Capital Grille dry ages their beef in-house, in their restaurants. You can often see the dry aging cabinet when you walk in. They age their USDA prime beef for 18 to 24 days in controlled humidity dry aging rooms at each location, which is expensive, time-consuming, and something that almost no chain restaurant does. Most chains that claim aged beef are wet aging, soaking the meat in its own juices inside a vacuum seal. Dry aging is entirely different. The moisture loss concentrates the flavor. The natural enzymes break down muscle fibers for extraordinary tenderness, and you get a depth of flavor that simply cannot be replicated any other way. The result? A Capital Grille steak tastes like a steakhouse steak, not a chain steak. The porcini rubbed bone-in New York strip, the bone-in Kona-crusted dry-aged sirloin, the 22-ounce bone-in ribeye. These are genuinely world-class preparations. Their culinary team is trained to fine dining standards, their service is exceptional, their wine list is award-winning, and their dining room feels more like a private club than a chain restaurant. Price runs $60 to $120 or more for steaks. Yes, it's expensive, but compared to what you'd pay at a non-chain dry-aging steakhouse of similar quality, Capital Grille holds its own in quality, while offering greater accessibility nationwide. In-house dry-aged USDA prime beef, fine dining caliber service and training, national accessibility. Capital Grille is the gold standard of American steak chains, full stop. The bottom line? The gap between the best and worst steak chains in America is enormous. We're talking about the difference between chemically tenderized select beef and hand-selected, house-dry-aged USDA prime, all under the same umbrella of going out for a steak. You work hard for your money. You deserve to know what's actually on your plate. If you found this video helpful, drop a like, share it with someone who loves a good steak.